ArchaeoLOGIC, the internet's best archaeology-based quiz show. Don't think too hard about it. Anyway, congratulations to Joshua Aaron Davis for correctly identifying this as barbed wire. Yeah, I know this is a pretty distinctive thing, the devil's rope as it's called, but I wanted to talk about it this week because even though it's not the most challenging clue we've had here, it is still a fascinating artifact, and indeed one of the most interesting and definitive tools of the modern American West. So the story of barbed wire is in many ways the story of how the West was won. Do you guys remember the movie Oklahoma? How there's the new settlers developing agricultural tracts of land and they're kind of butting heads with the established older rancher cowboys who just let their cattle and their horses roam free? Well, that actually was happening in the mid to late 1800s in the American West. And it was something that had to change because initially these areas were vast prairies. There was no real concept of them belonging to anyone because it was open land. But as settlements developed, as farms started, that had to change because you had farmers who were actually investing in the land, planting crops, harvesting those crops, relying on them, and if you had cattle go through that area and eat those food crops, well, you'd have people losing a lot of money. And so this actually became an issue. People had to find new ways to define and parcel out what had before been just open territory, which is where this guy comes in. Now, during that time period, people were working on ways to develop better fencing. So in the late 1800s, you see a lot of different patents come through for new kinds of wood and wire fences. Now, in 1868, a guy named Michael Kelly invents the first form of barbed wire. Why barbed? Well, you see all of these points sticking out here? These are little bits of wire wrapped around the initial piece, and what that does is it means that if a cow actually walks all the way up to the edge, they're going to get a prick. They're going to be slightly hurt. And they're going to be less likely to want to trample through the fence to get to whatever's on the other side. Now that's important, because in this time period, that was a big issue. You had cattle breaking free of the grounds that they were supposed to be on. You had people who had purchased land, who were working that land and wanted to control it and rely on it. And if you had cattle break free of property, then you could have damage. In Kansas, they even had laws that if livestock got into somebody else's property, not only was the owner of the animals responsible for paying back whatever was damaged or eaten or trampled, but the owner of the property actually had right to own that animal until they'd been paid back. Because this was serious business. These were people's livelihoods. So Michael Kelly invents this system of adding to an existing fence a thin bit of wire that will hurt the cattle if they try to get past it. A couple years later, this is in 1874, Joseph Glyden invents what is basically the modern version. As you can see on our piece of barbed wire right here, not only is there a piece of wire with barbs, there's a second piece of wire wrapped all the way around that, increasing durability and strength. There are now over 2,000 different types of barbed wire, and you find them across the United States, you find them in other countries, but it was essentially invented right here in order to reimagine a space. Because from what had been unending prairies and undefined territory, you were suddenly creating settlements and you were creating regulated, used land. And so this was an instrumental piece of changing the world. Well, that about wraps it up for that. If you are ready, we can move on to next week's mystery artifact. So here is next week's mystery material for you. If you have an idea about what this might be, please let us know in the comments. And once again, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter, and have a wonderful and archaeologic week.